All right, so last night, Donald Trump, the leading candidate in the Republican Party, sat down to do a town hall on CNN with Caitlin Collins up in New Hampshire, and this went pretty much completely off the rails almost immediately. Like off the bat, they were immediately talking about the 2020 election, and Trump was doubling down on some of his election lies and all of that good stuff. So we're going to get to some of that here. There was way too much for me to cover this all in one video, so I'll have more on this tomorrow with some of the other aspects of it. I mean, they talked about the 2020 election, they talked about January 6th, they talked about the border and immigration, they talked about gun violence and Ukraine and the debt ceiling and just so many different things that if I tried to cover it in one video, it would end up being like 2 hours long. But we're just going to focus on a couple different things here, okay? Some of the election claims and some of the crowd reactions to the E. Jean Carroll trial that I talked about a couple days ago on this channel, and then also sort of like just the general conversation about whether or not CNN should have done this kind of an event in the first place. We're going to get to an AOC statement here at the end where she was basically saying it was irresponsible to even platform Donald Trump on this kind of a stage. So we'll get to all of that. But first, let's just go ahead and start off with this clip here where he's basically, again, doubling and tripling and quadrupling down on the lie that the 2020 election was stolen. So let's just go ahead and watch this real quick.
President Trump, thank you for your time here tonight. We got a great crowd here in New Hampshire, a lot of voters with a lot of questions about what your 2024 term would look like, what another Trump term would look like. We'll get to the voters shortly, but your polls show that you are dominating the Republican race right now, but you are also under active federal investigation for trying to overturn the 2020 election results. Your first term ended with a deadly riot at the Capitol, and you still have not publicly acknowledged the 2020 election results. Why should Americans put you back in the White House?
Because we did fantastically. We got 12 million more votes than we had in, as you know, in 2016. I actually say we did far better in that election. Got the most that anybody's ever gotten as a sitting president of the United States. I think that when you look at that result and when you look at what happened during that election, unless you're a very stupid person, you see what happens. A lot of the people in this audience, and maybe a couple that don't, but most people understand what happened. That was a rigged election, and it's a shame that we had to go through it. It's very bad for our country. All over the world, they looked at it, and they saw exactly what everyone else saw. You look, even if you just look recently with the 51 intelligence agents, that made a 16-point difference. If you look at the FBI, if you look at the FBI and Twitter, they call it Twitter files, made a big difference. If you look at
Mr. President, back to what you just said there, though.
Okay, so, I mean, obviously, he's kind of doing like a two-pronged approach here, and I just want to make something 100% clear just in case, like, the algorithm or YouTube guidelines wants to, like, take this video down. Okay, obviously, the claim that, like, there was some massive vote fraud rigging scheme with, like, Hugo Chavez from Venezuela, and, you know, he was taking over the Dominion voting machines and all of that stuff, it's obviously complete bullshit. We all know that at this point. The other thing that he was referencing there was sort of this idea that, like, maybe the government played a role in him losing the election by trying to assist in suppressing the Hunter Biden laptop story. That's like a different, much more like complex conversation to be having. I mean, honestly, I don't think that, you know, some of the Hunter Biden stuff, if that wasn't, you know, portrayed as sort of an entirely false, like Russian op or something like that, that would have made a drastic difference in the election. But he seems to think that that was the case. And so he's claiming, I guess, that that was election rigging that caused him to lose the election. Okay, so again, doubling down on that stuff. We also had him over here saying about January 6th, all right, the riot at the Capitol building, saying there were a lot of people here that were probably there. Okay, some of you in the crowd, you may have been there. It was a beautiful day. Okay, folks, beautiful day. We call it beautiful. Okay, so he's doubling down on the 2020 election lies. He's also saying that January 6th was a beautiful day and basically he did absolutely nothing wrong on that day, I guess is the implication of what he's trying to say there. Now, you know, Caitlin Collins throughout this, she was kind of trying to push back on some of the stuff, but it's just not possible when you're in this kind of a setting going head to head with Donald Trump. And what you saw throughout the conversation here was him just basically steamrolling over her. Now, She did have some moments where she was trying to like fact check him and do other stuff, but like you immediately brought up at the beginning of this, the 2020 election. You know exactly what he's going to say. He's been saying the same thing since the election. It's not as if like in this moment he's going to have an epiphany and change his answer. I mean, you knew exactly what was going to happen in response to that. But then the other part of this is also keep in mind, and this is going to come into play later when we get to some of the E. Jean Carroll stuff and how the crowd is interacting with some of his answers. They seem to be overwhelmingly on his side. But the part of the weird part of this is that this is a Republican town hall that they're doing here. The people in the crowd are disproportionately either Trump supporters or just generally Republicans, or maybe some like independent, undecided people that are thrown in there. But the questions that were being asked overwhelmingly, especially at the start of the town hall, were questions that like I honestly don't even really think that most Republicans care about at this point. I mean, if you look at the polling data, the overwhelming majority of the Republican Party voters, they don't really want to keep relitigating the 2020 election. And so it was almost like she was asking questions that were designed to be like questions that a Democrat would want Trump to have to face and try to answer. Whereas, instead of asking questions about like what actual Republican voters would want him to be questioned on. So I thought that aspect of it was kind of weird. But now we continue here because we also got some crowd questions that were thrown in the mix here. And these were honestly some of the most interesting ones throughout this. So this guy's basically going to ask him if he's going to pardon the January 6 rioters. So let's see what he has to say about that.
President, my question to you is, will you pardon the January 6 rioters who were convicted of federal offenses?
I am inclined to pardon many of them. I can't say for every single one because a couple of them probably they got out of control. But, when you look at Antifa, what they've done to Portland, and if you look at Antifa, look at what they've done to Minneapolis and so many other places. Look at what they did to Seattle and BLM. Many people were killed. These people.
Okay, so first of all, obviously, he's saying he's going to pardon some of the January 6 rioters, maybe not some of the other ones that were more violent. I mean, I guess you could look at some of the charges and say some of them were kind of light. But if you look at the people who have actually been convicted, a lot of it was for shit that like anybody else in any other given context would also be found guilty for, like property destruction or beating up police officers or breaking into like federal grounds to try to stop the certification of an election. I mean, like that's kind of stuff that it seems like would warrant some sort of like prosecution in one way or another. But, the other part that he was bringing up there was obviously BLM and, these radical Antifa super soldier terrorists, and they were running rampant around the country and burning down cities. And then he added on there, it wasn't in this clip, but he added on basically the implication that like there's a two-tier justice system between how January 6 people have been treated versus how BLM has been treated. Did people just like black out what happened in 2020 during those protests, the summer of, after the killing of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor? I mean, there were thousands, tens of thousands of people who were arrested. Many of them were arrested over complete nonsense charges or even just like proximity charges where they were there when something happened, some property destruction happened, and then they get kettled into a group and there were mass arrests that were going on. There were people that were getting thrown into unmarked vans as these protests were going on. I mean, there was so much ridiculous stuff in terms of how those people were treated. And then also you have the added aspect of this, the argument that I think is 100% valid, that like you would not have even been able to get to the Capitol steps if this was a left-wing similar kind of protest, okay? The only reason they were even able to get to the Capitol in the way that they were, and even having some police officers like sort of guiding them into the Capitol and then sort of walking around and hanging out with them as they were walking through the Capitol. I mean, like that's because like a lot of those police officers probably were at least wanting to be lenient against people who share ideological, sympathies with them. I mean, we're talking about like, a police force that overwhelmingly skews to be right wing, obviously, right? I mean, you would not have had a BLM protest that would have been able to storm the Capitol without like a multitude of different people being killed on the spot, right? But he seems to think there's like this two-tier justice system, which is just completely absurd. And then another funny aspect of that was that Trump brought up like the horrific conditions that January 6 rioters who have been thrown in jail are facing within the US judicial system. And it's like, okay, maybe we shouldn't have these dilapidated, disgusting, horrific condition like prisons in the United States. That's not something that just applies to people who were arrested after January 6th. That's something that every American who's ever thrown in prison is also having to face. I mean, we just saw recent stories where there was one story of a man who was literally eaten alive, okay, in his prison cell by like insects and bugs and died from infections and diseases because of how disgusting his cell was, because because nobody's there to actually keep up hygiene and make sure that the place is clean. So that's something that just applies across the board. But again, he's pretending as if it's sort of like a two-tier justice system. Now, we also had this part, which was absolutely hilarious, given how lenient Mike Pence has been on Donald Trump over the last couple of months since he re-announced his presidency, or even since January 6th. So here's Trump basically just like dunking on Mike Pence and refusing to apologize after his supporters wanted to hang him during the January 6th events.
The person who was at the Capitol that day, as you know, was your vice president, Mike Pence, who says that you endangered his life on that day.
I don't think he was in any danger.
Mr. President, do you feel that you owe him an apology?
No, because he did something wrong. He should have put the votes back to the state legislatures, and I think we would have had a different outcome. I really do.
But he doesn't have the authority to do that, as you know.
What?
The vice president does not have the authority to reject those.
Are you ready?
Those
Let's have this one
results.
out. Just
Okay, the crowd was clapping for that. Okay, I don't owe him shit. I don't owe him an apology. He was never in any danger. I mean, we saw some of the videos, right? If you guys, try to think back in your minds of some of the videos on January 6th, how close some of the Capitol rioters got to Mike Pence. He was like one hallway away, or like even like a couple feet away at some points as they were fleeing the Capitol. These, senators and other members of Congress were fleeing the Capitol. It was not that far away, okay, from some of them potentially being in the direct proximity of Mike Pence after they were chanting and building the noose outside on the lawn of the Capitol, right? And chanting to hang Mike Pence. I mean, maybe, I guess you could say he didn't have a gun like directly pointed at his head, but I mean, come on, man. I mean, it's absolutely hilarious that even with this continuing to double down on just trashing Mike Pence and insisting that he single-handedly had the ability to overturn, or at least assist in overturning the election, which he didn't, that even with all of that, Mike Pence is still going light on Donald Trump, right? I guarantee you, if it came to a vote between Joe Biden and Donald Trump in 2020 or in 2024, Mike Pence is going to vote for Donald Trump. He's going to vote for the guy who almost got him killed and now is like dancing on him and like doesn't even really care that, any of this happened to Mike Pence. I mean, it's honestly just amazing. Okay, so now I want to sort of transition real quick to this other aspect of it, which again is that story that I talked about a couple days ago, which was Trump being found liable for $5 million for sexual battery against E. Jean Carroll back in the 90s. And so, this part was disturbing in one sense, but you're going to see how the crowd responds to basically him trashing E. Jean Carroll in this entire situation.
usually you leave office, you say, I'm sorry, but I'm going to back home. I'm back home to my family and everything. I'm going to be resigned. My poll numbers went up, and they went up with the other fake charge, too. Because what's happening is they're doing this for election interference. This woman, I don't know her. I never met her. I have no idea who she is. I had a picture taken years ago with her and her husband, nice guy, John Johnson. He was a newscaster, very nice.
Okay, wait, can we follow up on that real quick? Because how do you say, I don't know who she is, I've never met her, but also I took pictures with her and I met her this one time at the place that you're describing, right? I mean, it's kind of like a sentence by sentence contradiction. It's kind of amazing how Trump's brain works in that way, but he continues.
Man, she called him an ape. Happens to be African American. Called him an ape. The judge wouldn't allow us to put that in. Her dog or her cat was named Vagina. The judge wouldn't allow to put that in. All of these things. But with her, they could put in anything. Access,
this
Hollywood.
This was a jury of 9 people who found you liable of sexual abuse. Do you think that will deter women from voting for you?
No, I don't think so, because I think the whole thing, just so you understand, ready? I never met this woman. I never saw this woman. This woman said, I met her at the front door of Bergdorf Goodman, which I rarely go into, other than for a couple of charities. I met her in the front door. She was about 60 years old, and this is like 22, 23 years ago. I met her in the front door of Bergdorf Goodman. I was immediately attracted to her, and she was immediately attracted to me. And we had this great chemistry. We're walking into a crowded department store. We had this great chemistry, and a few minutes later, we end up in a room, a dressing room of Bergdorf Goodman, right near the cash register. And then she found out there were locks on the door, so she said, I found one that was open. She found one. She learned this at trial. She found one that was open. What kind of a woman meets somebody and brings them up, and within minutes, you're playing hanky-panky in a dressing room, okay? I don't know if she was married then or not. John Johnson, I feel sorry for you, John Johnson.
Mr. President.
Okay. So, I mean, again, there's a lot of contradictions there. he wasn't found guilty of rape, but that's just because of like the technical like definition of rape in New York law, and the jury obviously didn't think it met that threshold. But he was found guilty of sexual battery, and he's just sort of like mocking this entire situation. I mean, granted, Trump is always an entertaining guy. I'm not gonna doubt that aspect of it, but you got like a whole crowd of people who are just like laughing after this guy was just found guilty for sexually assaulting this woman. Okay. And they're just like cackling and loving it and eating it up. Right. I mean, it's just like a kind of weird, bizarre situation going on there. And also, what the hell was that about the cat being named Vagina? Is that true? I have no idea. If that's true, why? Why is your cat named Vagina? And also, why would that be something that would be admissible in the court? I mean, he brought that up as if like, oh, the reason I lost the court proceedings is because they wouldn't let me tell the jury that E. Jean Carroll's cat was named Vagina. Like, what is going on, man? Okay, again, very chaotic situation, okay, on this town hall. Now, again, on top of the E. Jean Carroll stuff, one more time, he also swore on his kid's life that he didn't know who she was, I guess. So let's watch this one real quick.
Can I ask you, given you're recounting
I
your
don't know
version?
who, and I tell you this.
But Mr.
Are
President,
you ready?
can I
swear
ask
on
you
my
because-
children, which I'd never do. I have no idea who this woman. This is a fake story, made up story.
Okay, first of all, man, there is no goddamn way that you have never sworn on your children's life. Okay, we know how little you really care about, or probably even like, your own children. Okay, you would throw them under the bus in a second in order to benefit yourself in the short or the long term. Okay, so on that aspect of it, you're lying. Okay, he probably does this on any given Tuesday. Okay, he would do this in any situation. He would risk all of their lives in order to try to get a leg up in any kind of conversation. So swears on his kids' lives that he didn't know this woman, even though he kind of also admitted that he did meet her that one time. I don't know. I mean, listen, again, he's just full of contradictions. It doesn't matter. For him, it's more about just like the entertainment value. It's more about just like selling a narrative to the crowd than it is about like getting into the intricate details and trying to like facts and logic your way out of a conversation. But, one more thing that I wanted to show you guys here, and then we'll end this segment off. He also sort of doubled down in a very bizarre way on the Access Hollywood tapes, where, of course, he said, when you're famous and you're rich, people will just let you like basically grope them, or women will let you grope them. Basically without permission. And so he defended this in a very bizarre way. Let's just go ahead and watch this.
There was a tape deposition of you from October in it. You defended the comments that you made on that Access Hollywood tape about being able to grab women how you want. Do you stand by those comments?
I said if you're famous and rich or whatever I said, but I said if you're a star, you are, and I said women let you. I didn't say you grab. I said women let. You didn't use that word, but if you look, women let you. Now, they said, will you take that back? I said, look, for a million years, this is the way it's been. I want to be honest. This is the way it's been. I can take it back if you'd like to, but if you're a famous person, if you're a star, and I'm not referring to myself, I'm saying people that are famous, people that are
you
stars,
were asked in the deposition,
people
do you
that are
consider
rich,
yourself to be a star,
people
and you
that are
said yes.
powerful, they tend to do pretty well in a lot of different ways, okay? And you would like me to take that back? I can't take it back because it happens to be true. I said it's been true for 1 million years, approximately a million years, perhaps a little bit longer than that.
Okay, again, with the million years thing, guy, all right, humans in like our modern form have only been around for like a couple 100,000 years. All right, this is not okay, he doesn't know the times. That's fine. Whatever. We'll skip past that for now. I mean, the rest of it, he's basically just saying like, yeah, I said that shit. Now he's kind of being extremely misleading because, he's saying that, I said that they let you do it. No, man. I mean, listen, we all watched the Hollywood Access tapes. I mean, you can go and watch them for yourselves or re-listen to it. I mean, he was describing without asking permission, going up and groping women, and that like because of your power status, because you're rich and you're famous, that there's nothing that they can do about it, right? I'm pretty sure he explicitly said in the Access Hollywood tapes that that you don't need to ask permission, and basically that you can just get away with it, right? And so, I mean, again, we all know exactly what you were talking about, okay? You could do some sort of defense of it and saying like, oh, I was just bullshitting, I was doing locker room talk or whatever, which was sort of the narrative he used to go with. But now it's like he's just saying like, yeah, I said it, and it's actually true and has always been true. And as he said in the deposition, maybe it's fortunate that it has been true. So, okay, I mean, there you go. I mean, this is just sort of like the first part. Again, I'll have more content on some of the rest of the answers that he gave on other different subjects tomorrow. But there's your coverage on the January 6th stuff, on the 2020 election stuff, on the E. Jean Carroll stuff, the Access Hollywood stuff. And then I just want to finish off here with the post town hall, I guess, survey that they did, or the focus group that they did here. Now, if you're listening on the podcast and you can't see this, basically they're asking the question here, and I'm not going to play the audio because it was pretty distorted, but they asked the question here to some of the people who were in the audience, and they're asking them, did this affect the way that you are going to perceive Trump in the future? Did it help Trump? Did it hurt Trump? Or did it keep it neutral? And as you can see in this video, every single person in the crowd said that it just didn't change their opinion of Donald Trump. So, I mean, I guess there's sort of the answer. Now, obviously, this is a sample size of what, like 8 people that are sitting here. So maybe this will change the minds of some other portions of Trump's base. I mean, I highly doubt it. This was just like standard Trump. I mean, there was nothing that really like shocked me about anything that he said there that we just went through. You know, I don't think this is going to be anything that's going to like turn any hardcore Trump supporters off of Donald Trump for 2024. But, you know, maybe, I mean, this would have some sort of an impact on his chances in 2024, at least in a general election among some normies, when they go and they see him basically like mocking the fact that he was just found guilty of sexually assaulting somebody, and you know, all of the other kind of like gross stuff that he was adding in there with the Access Hollywood tapes, and continuing to talk about the 2020 election, continuing to basically praise January 6th, saying he's going to pardon some of the rioters. I mean, that's stuff that could turn off some normies or some centrists. But you know, one more thing here from AOC, because this is sort of part of the conversation or the debate about whether or not they should have platformed Trump at all. Now, AOC, basically, she's saying, I know that you said earlier that you will not comment on platforming such atrocious disinformation, but I would. I think it was profoundly an irresponsible decision. It was shameful. Okay, so I mean, on the one hand, like, I kind of get like, yeah, when you're watching a whole crowd of Trump supporters that are just like laughing at sexual assault or rape accusations and stuff like that, it's definitely like gross. And when you're having to relitigate once again the 2020 election lies and all of that bullshit, it's frustrating. But I mean, we all know, you know, what the reality is at this point. If you believe that it was stolen, you know, watching this is not going to change your mind. You know, if you don't believe that it was stolen, then watching Donald Trump repeat that for the 700th time in the last couple of years, probably not going to convince many people that it was stolen. So for me, that just isn't really that much of a big deal. But then on top of that, in the main point, my main response to this would be, you can't deplatform Donald Trump. I mean, like, obviously he was kicked off of Twitter for a while, but like, he didn't go away. This is the leading candidate for 2024 in the Republican primary, but also, according to some polls, even leading Joe Biden. You can't just like pretend that this guy doesn't exist. And honestly, I think that it might actually backfire if you would try to pretend that Trump doesn't exist, because then some normies, some independents, some like undecided voters might forget how absolutely insane this guy is if they're not seeing this on a large platform. So I honestly think this might have, you know, helped, I guess, in the long run. If your priority is not allowing Trump to get back to the White House, there's going to be a lot of disagreement on that. I guess we'll have to wait and see what some of the actual polling data shows in the long term on this. But, you know, honestly, I don't think it's going to make that big of a difference, but we'll keep you guys updated. And again, I'm going to cover many more clips from this tomorrow, because some of the other things were even wilder than what we just watched in this.
Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.